Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast, your association's no-fluff playbook to navigating and thriving in Industry 4.0 or the digital marketplace. Each week, we bring expert insights to help you and your association stay ahead of the curve.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Association 4.0 podcast. I am your host today, Amy Williams. I'm a senior consultant with OrgSource, and today I will be interviewing my colleague, Kevin Martlage, about Myers Briggs. Kevin, before we dive in, why don't you introduce yourself and share your background and experience with Myers Briggs?
Sure. It's great to be with you today, Amy, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you today. And my background's pretty diverse. I've spent the last, 25 years working with various organizations such as Xerox, FedEx Office, and a printing company out in New York City, and had the opportunity to work with a ton of great teams over those years, both on, individually and across the world, actually. And just really have always enjoyed kind of the development of teams and individuals to help them reach their ultimate goals. My last job before joining the OrgSource team was with the International Society of Arboriculture, where I was able to help certify people to take care of trees around the world. And I really fell in love with the ability to work with nonprofits at a different level and helping them kind of bring that business aspect to running their organization. And I met Sherry and Kevin, had the opportunity to come and join the OrgSource team, which was just fantastic. And allowed me to then provide some of that background and knowledge to organizations around as part of their team. So where Myers Briggs came into all that is I was looking at how I could continue to help develop teams in many different areas. I became introduced to Myers Briggs through actually my father, who's certified in Myers Briggs as well. And I went and took the week-long class to become certified. And I feel like, as we go through the podcast, we'll talk about it a little bit more specifically, but Myers Briggs really just provides a framework for people to help understand themselves and how they can, use that self-awareness to impact teams. And so I've had the opportunity over the last 2.5 years to provide, Myers Briggs at different levels to probably over 100 and some people. And just helping them understand themselves and what that, their personalities are all about, and how that can then translate into, enhancing the overall team dynamic in the organizations they're working with.
Well, I, for one, am excited about this topic. I've had the Myers Briggs test done before, so I'm looking forward to today's discussion. So with introductions out of the way, let's dive into the fun stuff. So okay. For those who may not be familiar with it, what is Myers Briggs?
So Myers Briggs, I'm going to refer to it as MBTI during the podcast. If that's all right. It's a little bit easier to say.
Sure.
It's an assessment that's a psychometric personality tool that gives you insight into what makes you you. And the goal is that by developing a clearer sense of that self-awareness and the awareness of others by using this tool, you'll be able to better frame kind of decisions, reduce miscommunication, understand personal needs more effectively, and then, using that self-awareness, how that can then translate to the effectiveness of the team. And all that information that MBTI provides you at that, self-awareness personality type level is great information to have as you continue to develop your personal leadership style, as well as, impact the entire team that you might be working with. So long story short, it's a personality assessment, a psychometric, driven tool, very statistically valid, which we'll get into here in just a few minutes. And it's used all around the world and is one of the most popular assessment tools out there currently.
So I was surprised in preparing for today's interview. I read on the Myers Briggs website that only 17% of executives are confident that their organizations have the right leadership to deliver on their strategic priorities. How can associations benefit from Myers Briggs?
Sure, that's a great question. So there's a lot that we could probably get into, that take more than probably a half-hour podcast. But I think one of the most important things to understand about MBTI is the fact that it has nothing to do with the skills that you have as an individual or a leader or your aptitude to do those jobs. So it cannot really tell companies or hiring managers who they should hire or who is the best fit for a position within their organization. But with that said, to your point, what it can provide is personal understanding and knowledge of an individual's personality preferences, which can be very effective as you're understanding how you can impact that team and do those things. Once that is understood, teams can then kind of utilize that information to help enhance the overall collective performance of the team by improving communication, identifying team leadership traits, providing insight into how individuals in the team can take in information and make decisions on that information. So while it may not address that issue that only 17% of executives are confident their organizations have the right leadership to deliver on that strategic priorities, what it can do is help provide you a common knowledge and a basis in terms of your culture of your organization and helping that leadership team understand those personal preferences and how you can use those to enhance communication, become more effective by making sure there's appropriate trust amongst the team, how you communicate things out to your team, both on the membership side and your internal team, and really how you can kind of enhance the effectiveness of that team from where they are now to a new level. And I always refer to that as, you're going to help understand what you're leaving on the table in terms of your ability as a team. Assessing somebody's skills to actually do the job, that's a whole other conversation. But Myers Briggs and MBTI can certainly provide people that personal insight and understanding and how that affects the overall effectiveness of the team at a bunch of different levels.
So are you an advocate for, team members taking the test and then sharing with one another what their personality reflects?
Sure. So one thing with MBTI, as a practitioner that's certified, it's important to know that, the results of your assessment are strictly between you and me as the practitioner. Whether you share that with your team is totally up to you.
Right.
But with that said, that's the ethical part of all MBTI. With that said it's really important as we begin to work with teams and individuals that we have that conversation about, how important this information is. I have worked with organizations that there are a few members of the team that just aren't comfortable sharing that, and that's perfectly fine. We can still do a lot of effective work using MBTI and amongst that team. But ultimately, if they are able to share that information or willing to share that information, it really kind of, positively impacts that entire team from a holistic view that way. So I'm certainly an advocate of sharing it, but it's totally up to that person if they share it or not.
Yeah, I can see where that would be beneficial to share, but I can also understand where people may not be comfortable divulging that much. It might be a little too vulnerable for them.
Sure, absolutely.
So I know there are a lot of myths out there about Myers Briggs.
Mm-hmm.
Can we take some time to debunk those myths?
Sure, absolutely.
What are the biggest ones that you're familiar with?
I think the most common misperception or myth around Myers Briggs is that it's so difficult to understand compared to some of the other assessments that are out there, such as True Colors or the DISC assessment or some of the other ones that are out there. And I have to admit, I think while Myers Briggs and MBTI is more involved in regards to the information that is provided and generated based on your assessment, is absolutely unmatched in terms of the psychometric and statistical development of that assessment and how accurate it actually is and how valid it is based on the 70 plus years that it's been in existence and how Myers-Briggs goes about developing this. And so I think the biggest misperception is that it's very difficult to understand. And I would say that while it is, the amount of information that you have, once you get in there and dive into it, it may take a little bit more time to understand than maybe say True Colors or the DISC assessment, but the outcome and the impact it can have on you personally and collectively as a team is unlimited and frankly unmatched in my opinion compared to some of the other assessments and tools that are out there. So that's probably the biggest myth that I run into, that I talk to people about.
Okay, so not to put you on the spot, but I'm going to put you on the spot. Um,
Okay.
if someone has an assessment come back with, like I'm an INFJ,
hmm
how do you use that information to guide a leader and improve their performance and leadership?
Sure. So that's like the $1 million question, right? So by going through your assessment, it starts with you have your 4 letters like you. I'm an ISTJ, so we have some very similar things in terms of our personality. Um, but I go through and help them understand what their report says. So we go through a process first that you take your assessment, and I have the results, and I don't just give you the results. We have to sit down and go over them, because it's not ethical for me just to send them to you and say, here you go do something with it. So we need to sit down and really understand it. So we go through a process that really validates your results versus your understanding of Myers Briggs. And so that's the first thing that we do, is to really spend some time to go over that and to make sure that that individual understands that. That's most effective in an individual one-on-one situation, but certainly it can be done in a group setting as well, especially if everybody's willing to share their results. If not, then we go through the same process we would individually, but we spend some time as a group going over what Myers-Briggs are, what's the different parameters are, the letters, all that kind of stuff, what it means. And then I hand out your individual results, and typically I would have them follow up individual calls with those people if we do it a team setting. It's best if you keep that team setting, say 15 to 20 people max, if that's the possibility. We can talk about that more later on. But what I help you do is to understand your preferences, what your 4 letters mean. And then the step 2 part of Myers-Briggs is we divide those 4 letters down into even further details to help you really understand the specific traits about your personality. And so we go through that process to really make sure you understand the interpretation of your report, what that means, make sure we're on the same page, your results versus what you feel, and really do a validation there. Once that's done, and say we're in a team setting, we then go through a process I like to call the living type table, and that's what Myers-Briggs calls it either, but we actually chart everybody's results out on a table in the 16 different combinations that might be there. And we start to have conversations about, okay, what's a ISTJ versus a ESTJ, whatever, the different possibilities and combinations. And we start to really look at the dynamic of the team. So we start with understanding you personally, and then how that affects the overall team, and what are some gaps that we can work on? How can we enhance communication? How can we leverage the different personality types within the team? How can we understand maybe where are some of the gaps on the team in terms of personality and how we take in information, how we make decisions? And we have to be very aware of those gaps as an executive team as we're moving forward. And so that's where it really starts to get fun. And we start to really take your personal preferences, look at them as a whole, as a team, and then we do some coaching and additional work with them to understand what that means and how we can enhance the team.
Yeah, I can see where that would be beneficial, because communication in any business environment, whether it's interdepartmental or even within a team, communication is so core. And having good
Absolutely.
communication skills for all of the team members and understanding, you know, the communication challenges would absolutely be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
When thinking about businesses today with everybody being remote, communication just
Mm-hmm.
becomes one more obstacle. And so I can really
Mm-hmm.
see where Myers-Briggs can help teams, regardless of it, if they're face to face or remote.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So talk a little bit about how associations, once they go through the Myers-Briggs process, how it can help take them to the next level.
Sure. So So the biggest thing that I feel like, and this is kind of my opinion, and I do have some experience doing this with organizations, and I can see the enhancement that it's done. But the biggest thing that Myers Briggs is going to provide an association, and let's take a situation where we say, the entire organization has taken Myers Briggs. They understand their personal personality preferences. They understand how they're taking in information and making decisions on things, and where they get their energy from, all that stuff that Myers-Briggs shows you. They're really good at understanding what that is and how that impacts the overall team. What Myers-Briggs can do is it provides associations a common language and a framework that will help to enhance what I call the overall culture within that organization in some very important areas, such as building trust, enhancing communication that we talked about, just understanding each other. How many times have you been in a meeting where, maybe somebody's sitting there that they're very quiet and you're like, boy, they're being a little standoffish, and why aren't they participating? Well, if you really understand maybe the personality of that person, maybe they're very, introvert, and they like to sit there and kind of, think through things before they make that comment. And where the other person in the room, maybe they're very, big picture thinking. They like to talk through, the results and the information, the data, and talk through their decision making process. And so that's just one easy example of how it can help to improve that communication. So instead of that person, being, well, why aren't they participating? They say, well, that's their personality. And so as a leader, I may have to say, hey, Kevin, what are your thoughts? I could tell you're kind of moving through and crunching through some data in your head. I'd love to hear what you have to think about that. And so it really just helps to kind of understand each other at a different level. So there's not that time lost where you're trying to figure out, relationships, professional relationships within the office of why that person does something or why they don't. And so it provides that common language, that common understanding, and it really helps to build the overall culture within the organization on many different levels. And you can even use some of the Myers-Briggs information, not only to enhance culture and building trust and all that, but you can also use that to really help to address some conflict resolution within the organization. And how can you be very intentful on, resolving maybe some conflict that is there? And how can you, use that then to kind of enhance that overall team? And so to answer your question, it really is a common language that can be used to build the culture within the organization on many different levels, stemming from communication to building trust to conflict resolution to even leadership development, which we can talk about here in just a few minutes if you want.
I love that example you gave, because I have experienced leaders who said, if you're not going to sit in a meeting and participate, there's no point in you being there. And
Exactly.
being somebody who is more quiet in the meetings because I'm processing and thinking through, and how does this connect to strategy, and how might we execute this, or what might the obstacles be, as somebody who is a processor, I may not be the active one just throwing out ideas, but it doesn't mean I don't bring value. And we talk about, so much, especially within the association space, about diversity and inclusion that has to include diversity and personality types.
Absolutely.
And having that at the executive level just makes organizations stronger.
That's a great example. Yeah.
In the past, you've talked about the strong interest inventory being a great tool for association leaders. Do you want to share a bit about that and why you find it to be such a great tool?
Sure. So the strong interest inventory is really interesting. So, I became certified in Myers-Briggs, first. And then one of the tools that they also have is what they call the strong interest inventory. And so I very quickly identified there's a huge opportunity for that too. So I went back and got certified in that process as well. And while MBTI provides kind of insight into your personal preference in terms of your personality, that's one thing. The strong interest inventory provides insight to your personal preference in terms of your personal interests and what interests you and what energizes you and those kind of things. And so I primarily went and got certified in strong interest inventory because I do a lot of like career coaching and executive coaching with people. And, not only people that are just starting out in their career and, hey, what am I going to do with my life? Like my daughter, I just went through that with her. She goes into college, but also, people that have been in the workforce and are wanting to make a change in their career, or the people that are in their job and they love it, but okay, what's next within my organization? What's next? What do I need to do to get to that next level? And what does that next job look like? And so by combining the two, strong interest inventory and the MBTI report, into one report that they have, it really gives you a more holistic look in terms of not only your personality preferences, but also what interests you. And it gives you some more insight into, how do you like to learn? What kind of risks do you feel comfortable taking? Do you like to work as a team or individually? What kind of communication do you like? Those kind of things. And so why MBTI is very effective to help, the overall collective team and the individual kind of development and understanding. You couple that with strong interest inventory, and it could have some big impact into the overall team development, but it really helps with things like leadership development. And so, if I'm working with you on an executive coaching level, it helps to kind of guide some other things. It helps with professional development of, teams. So I have individuals that may have, their 5 or 6 direct reports through the strong interest inventory. And I work with them directly on, okay, what's next in your career? What are some areas of your development that you can work on? And so you can then, as an organization, it has nothing to do with your skill, just like Myers Briggs. It's not about that, but it can help to identify some opportunities and some areas to enhance your leadership, enhance your career, help you understand kind of what's going to keep me engaged at that next job, what's going to keep me engaged at my current job, and what are some opportunities that may be out there. And so it's really just kind of a great holistic kind of look at your personality and your interests, and how can we help translate that into higher performance for you and understanding, as well as the team and ultimately your organization, which is what we're all here, is to continue to drive the effectiveness of the organization and the team that we might be on, right?
Yeah, I could see where that would be helpful for sure.
Mm-hmm.
We are coming up on our time, but we've talked a bit
Wow.
about communication and culture, and those
Mm-hmm.
being essential elements in positive and productive work environments,
Mm-hmm.
even with those environments being remote. Can you share a
Mm-hmm.
bit about the other consulting services that you offer through .org Source?
Absolutely. So, the two big ones that we offer right now is the Myers Briggs kind of overview for both individuals and teams. So that's like a 20-minute online assessment that you might take. And then, like I mentioned before, it would be an hour individual review, or, even a 90-minute to 2-hour team review if we do that. So we call that the introduction to Myers Briggs. That's just a way to introduce it to your organization, and to begin to get you involved in understanding what Myers Briggs is and all the power that it has and how it can enhance your organization. Kind of the next step with that we offer is, how do we enhance communication using Myers Briggs? So that would be kind of the next step. And that's where we could come in, and typically it's a 3 or 4 hour kind of, workshop that ideally is in person, but we could certainly, given the pandemic and the current restraints, we could certainly do that virtually as well. But that's where we really take all of the information with Myers Briggs that we received. We chart it out. We start looking at the things like the living type table that I was talking about. We start to have conversations amongst that leadership group about, what are the gaps? What are the enhancements that we can do? How do we really leverage this newfound powerful information that we've received from MBTI? And how does that translate into some opportunities for us as a leadership team to understand what we're truly leaving on the table? So, ideally, that would be the second step. Some other things that we do that help out is really, coming in to look at your culture. And so we've done some work with some other organizations through OrgSource to really come in and look at your culture, help you identify what are those things that are important for you as an organization in terms of culture, to ensure you're supporting your team, communicating properly, and providing them all the tools, resources, and kind of common language to enhance the overall culture of your organization. So those would be 3 things specifically around Myers Briggs that we currently offer. And And, you know, in my experience with using Myers Briggs, it always starts to, as you understand it, open up other opportunities and possibilities to say, hey, you know, what if we looked at this? This is a gap, or this is an opportunity that we've identified through all this. And, you know, OrgSource, can you come in and help us, you know, facilitate going through that? And so we're certainly always open to doing those things as well. But those are some of the specific programs that we have in place that we can come in and offer tomorrow if you wanted to.
Well, Kevin, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing your experience. This was very informative. And I think you've given our listeners a lot to think about when it comes to using Myers Briggs to advance their organizations. To our listeners, thanks for joining us today. If you would like to connect with Kevin, you can email him at martlage@orgsource.com, or he's also available on LinkedIn. For more tips and support for strengthening your association, be sure to visit .orgsource. If you'd like to access relevant information and resources, please consider joining Org Community, which is a platform for association leaders to connect and learn from one another and to OrgSource consultants. Thanks again for joining us. Bye.
We hope you enjoyed this episode and discovered tips and information that will add value to your leadership style and your association. OrgSource specializes in positioning teams for success with solutions for technology, strategy, and marketing. Please contact us at info@orgsource.com or visit www.orgsource.com to find out how to keep your organization on track to Association 4.0.